Agenda review and disposition.
All set.
Minutes. Let's see who I have here. Walter and Barbara. Did you see anything in the minutes that you want to change? No. Yeah, looks good to me too. Okay, CTE open house.
Yes, as you know, we're doing a lot this summer to finish up not only the CTE project, but also things in the building. And we would like to have an open house for the community with the board's approval on Sunday, October 6th. The community would have access to the CTE center along with cafeteria, the CTE classrooms in the hallway going to the cafeteria, and also be able to come up and see all the work that you've authorized for the library. So that would be sort of the focus, and then the atrium would be obviously right there at the front door. So we think it's a great week. We should have, it should be fall. Could be the middle of the winter, but it should be fall and the beginning of the foliage season. So we think it'd be a great time to do that.
Great.
Is that okay with the board? We'll take care of all the publicity, and we'll invite all the folks that really had an awful lot to do with helping us get money and help us along the legislative process too.
Mark, did you say the hours, or were you thinking afternoon?
No, we're gonna sort of sit down and see what we want to do for the hours, but it would be an afternoon, a mid-afternoon, sort of a 1 to 4 kind of thing. We don't want to interfere with any church services or anything in the morning, so we would be doing that.
Sounds nice.
Yes. That's great. And a list of summer projects.
Yes, we had, the last time we were together, we talked about a lot of projects, so what we did was summarize for you, and I think it's with your agenda, summarize for you what we're actually doing, and for the sake of the folks watching us, let me walk down through this. We'll have CTE paving and landscaping done around this corner of the building, and we'll be finishing off the lawn. Is coming back where we let people park in the fall. That grass is beginning to grow, and we're getting our lawn back. And that's funded by CTE funds and some local funds. Brick retaining wall is that you'll see the veneer brickwork coming down along here. We had to stop it because of the weather. We'll finish that up along with the painting. That's a CTE project. Loading dock and rail location. The rail from above the atrium will be relocated onto the loading dock, will be painted the outside color. We'll recycle that railing and put it on there, and then the longer loading dock to accommodate trucks and things like that. That's a combination of CTE and local money. Compactor pad and the compactor, that's around the back. I think that has been, some of the work is started. They're going to finish it up after the kids leave. Again, that's CTE local. Some rear fencing. We're going to take those pole and sort of the chains that we have just to dress up the back side of the building. So when you're looking at events from the fields, either field, you look up, there's a very similar view. So it's a nice boundary definer for us. Library upgrades and renovation, that's local money, and also some of the state grant have to do with that. Security, phones in the entrance, that's state grant, Homeland Security, and also some local money. Atrium, safety glass, and rail relocation, that's local money, and painting in some specific areas, that'll be local money. And then equipment, health tech will continue to bring in some equipment with Perkins funds, CTE funds, and a little bit of local money. And then furniture, the library, that's CTE, Perkins, and local. So trying to juggle and make sure that we get the biggest bang for our dollar from some of these grants and things like that. So that's the improvements list. John and the gang will be pretty busy this summer. But we'll be in and out. We have really a 5-week period where we'll have the building to ourselves before the kids start coming back. So we're going to get that done. Yes, Barbara?
Not part of this report, but part of facilities. How are we doing with technology? We used to be on sort of a
Right, we stayed with that. As you know, this year, the freshmen coming in, every freshman will be given a Chromebook, and then we will be supplementing that in the building with really upgrades of equipment that need to be upgraded. But you'll really be moving to every student having a Chromebook. So that, I think in the long haul, it's good for the kids, and also it'll be cheaper for the district to fund things that way. But we still have an infrastructure that we have to maintain. But that's basically where the majority of the budget is going, is to Chromebooks for the freshmen.
And that's for the incoming freshmen?
Yes, we're going to fund it. Each freshman class will come in beginning with this freshman class. They'll get Chromebooks.
And the funds from that coming from our regular budget?
Regular budget,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
It's theirs to keep it year-round for a number?
We haven't finished that up yet. We in terms of what that policy will be, you guys will see that in July. So we collect them at the elementary level. This is not new to SAU 48. Some of our districts have practiced this for a bit. But we'll talk about that and make a recommendation to you.
Okay, great. Other business? Anyone have any questions or concerns? And our next meeting is August 20th.
Policy and budget.
It being post 5 o'clock, policy budget committee meeting is drawn to call to order. Agenda review and disposition, any changes?
All set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Approval of minutes from May 21st, 2019. Anybody have any changes to said minutes? Okay, so they are approved as written. Handbook approval, Mr. Price.
It's all yours.
So some of the changes that are coming forward is just to update you on just some small things. The first one on the HiSET, the change is the cost of the HiSET test itself went from $65. If you turn it over now, it's $125. So that is the change for that. So it's more of a, you see on that, so if you look on the front page of it, it's crossed out where it says, see where it says underlined, it says free?
Yeah.
The cost, the only cost is, and then strike through the $65 for the official HiSET, and instead it's $125 for the HiSET test. So that's the only change there. The next page are the testing programs, and this was really just to bring the handbook up to date. The New England Common Assessment Program is no longer the statewide assessment, it's the SAT, so we're just bringing the handbook up to date. We no longer issue the NEWA test, so if you look at the pages, this is updated now with the school day SAT, with essay that we give to the juniors, the PSAT 8, 9, and PSAT 10, which we give to the 9th and 10th graders. And the state still requires us to give the SAS science test instead of what used to be the NETAP or whatever it was. It's changed its structure through the years. So those are the changes that you'll see under the testing programs. Dress code, this was already approved earlier this winter by the board, so that's just in here to let you know that that's going to be changed in the handbook. But that policy change was updated earlier this school year by the school board. Over to the acceleration policy, the big change here is, which was already approved by the board, again, just bringing it back in front of you, was that now for Algebra 1 and World Language taking an 8th grade student will receive credit for that. So that is what is showing up, but that was already approved by the board. And then I'm not positive, Mr. Aller, can you speak to the next one? Student Records Access and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act?
Yeah.
Looks like this whole section was redone and adopted, and I'm not aware of what exactly.
This, we asked legal counsel to go through all the FERPA policies for us to make sure that we had the latest information. The regulatory process prior to the Trump administration was very active, and then Trump administration came on board, some of those things have been recalled. So we just sort of said, where are we? And please bring us up to date in the handbook. So this is what's been submitted from legal counsel.
So if you move on to the next, the French Honor Society and Spanish Honor Societies, again, those were approved earlier this year by the board. And this is just adding it into the handbook right along on the same page where the National Honor Society, National Technical Honor Society are located, so that will be in there. When you look to the computer use policy changes, especially now that the incoming ninth graders are being given Chromebooks, the request here was to, rather than the old where we were taking away computer privileges for violations of the computer use policy, now it's just discipline coming in, rather than taking away the students' use of the computers, since a lot of the curriculum is online and they're having the Chromebooks. So we just figured it was easier to give detentions for that rather than take away their use. And that is what I have.
Thank you, Chris. Fiscal year 2019 unreserved fund balance and retainage estimates.
Yes. Before we do that, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to, and I'm sorry I didn't pick this up when we did the agenda, just wanted to run down the revenues with you, just a quick second, because that is germane to whether you have an unreserved fund balance and retainage. Does everyone have a copy of the revenues?
Yes.
The only major change from the last time we met, I told you that Medicaid was a late arriving revenue. And I think the last time we met, there were about $78,000 in Medicaid. Now we've received $145,024, so, which is significantly over our estimate. And that money will continue to come throughout the summer. We actually closed the books in late July because those revenues are revenues that were earned during fiscal year 19. So when you look at those numbers, we basically hit our revenue at $3.68 million. And then we still will get the difference between the $387 cash in the door for tuition and the $431 that was billed. That's just a couple of districts that will be sending in prior to June 30th. So we're going to hit our estimated revenue number, and all of that excess above and beyond our estimates will go back as unreserved fund balance. So the budget on the revenue side was right on the nose. Down underneath in assessments, you can see Wentworth and Thornton have already paid their full assessment. Most of the other districts are in the 90% category, and then Campton has a bill left to pay, a significant bill left to pay. So, but the revenues are fine, which leads us to unreserved fund balance and retainage. We had promised to give back $100,000 in unreserved fund balance, and we'll be able to do that. The other part of the opportunity that we have is to, for a period of 1 year, hold retainage, and that is an ability to hold on to some money, small percentage of your overall budget in case of any emergency. And the authority that we have is approximately about $264,000. So if you wanted to retain 264, give back 100, and anything above and beyond that, you'd be in a position to do that. What I'd like to do tonight is for you to vote to authorize us to retain up to $264,000. Doesn't mean that you're going to do it, but there's a vote to retain it prior to the end of the fiscal year. When we come back to close the books with you, then we'll say, okay, here's the excess revenues, here are the appropriations we didn't spend. We told the voters we're definitely giving you $100,000 back. We'll do that, and then you can have a conversation about, do you want to have retainage, do you want to give it all back? And that will be a policy decision that all of you will make. All right. But for tonight, for the record, so it gives us a little flexibility with the auditors, I would request that you vote to retain $264,000 at this moment in time, and then we will finalize that when we go to. So, for instance, if you voted that tonight and we came back in and it looked like you can retain 150 and then give back 100, then you'd be fine.
So it's up to?
Up to 264, yeah. And I'm not, we'll have to wait and see what the final number is. We just want the flex. And what becomes, if folks watching, well, what becomes of that 264? Does it dry up and stay in the savings account? No, it rolls over in the following year as part of your unreserved fund balance. So we have retainage now about 150 from the previous year that's rolling in. So that's why I can tell you tonight, you'll have $100,000 to give back because we got 150 over here. So there's potentially 100,000 going back and 50 that you could put toward retainage for next year. You've already hit that. And then we know we're gonna have excess revenue, so we're in good shape.
I'll make that motion to send it up to the full board.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All people on the committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We'll go to the full committee.
Thank you.
Memorandum of understanding for Campton Resource Officer with Plymouth Police Department. Why should it say Campton?
It should say campus.
I thought so. But Campton appreciates it.
It's good publicity.
They can pay the whole building.
Sorry about that. I didn't even see it. You have two documents in front of you. Similar documents were approved and signed next door at Plymouth Elementary School. So, because we have two political subdivisions involved on this campus and the political subdivision there. So what we have is a referencing safe school zone, which is basically crimes that we would have to report to the officer or someone by statute. The other one is a school resource officer, and that is basically a paragraph saying what the economic equation is, and then a rough outline of what the campus resource officer would do. So I put these in front of you for conversation tonight.
How did you work it out? When we talked last time, you were going to get prorated
Yes.
for the Penny Baker?
Right, what happens is the cost of the officer will be borne by the Plymouth Police Department. So it's their employee, their costs are in the budget, the town of Plymouth budget. In our budget, we have a lump sum, and Plymouth School District has a lump sum. So Steve Lefebvre and I sat down and said, all right, what's the cost of an officer? And then you break it out into per day. And then what happened was I used the formula. So we're gonna bring the officer here for I think 185 days or 180, whatever the days were. We're gonna take that and the cost of that officer for 185 days. 65% of the officer will be paid by Penny Baker, 35% of the officer will be paid by Plymouth. And that ratio comes from the Park and Rec ratio right now. Park and Rec spends about 65% of its time on this campus, 35% of its time next door. So we had to have a starting point. So we said, we'll start there. The officer will track their time, and next year I'll come in with a different ratio based on the time that was tracked. It'll be a snapshot look. But in December, I'm going to say, for the first 3 months, what's your percentage of time? And we'll use that as a calculation for next year. So say the officer costs $10,000, to us, not to Plymouth, but to us. So $6,500 would come from Penny Baker and $3,500 would come from Plymouth. But the overall ratio, the Park and Rec overall is 72% school, 28% town. We don't know what that ratio will be because we haven't any idea. So we're just going to get a bill for the number of days worked, whatever the gross cost is, the number of days worked with that 65-35 ratio. Sorry to make that long, but that's the long and short.
Sam?
Yeah, I had a few points, and I apologize for I had been thinking about some of these, and I didn't know how you wanted to approach it, just in terms of getting some potential changes. That was one of the questions I had, is the apportionment. And part of the issue was, how did we represent it to the citizens when it was proposed? My understanding was it was 2/3, 1/3, or 65-35, but I could be wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, between the two school districts.
So if the ratio though changes over time, is that something we can just do?
We do automatically when putting the lump numbers into the budget, because you'll have a lump for, it's in security,
Yep.
and you'll see a lump there, and I will tell you at that night, and tell the folks at the budget hearing, it's based on an audit of time. So maybe next year, the office is here 70% of the time, and
Yeah.
30% in Plymouth Elementary. That ratio will change based on the previous year's hours.
So I was going to suggest that we put the actual percentages in there, but what you're saying, Mark, is you prefer not to put the percentages in there in the MOU.
You can. You can do that. There's no reason you can't do that. But right now, that's just what we want.
But this is,
Yeah.
this is between the police department and us, not, he's talking about the ratios between us and the elementary school.
Right, and that's what I mean, because in terms of who's paying the bill, ultimately, you know, and I can't remember exactly what the percentage went to the taxpayer, but one is the town residents of Plymouth, and the other one is all the members of the Pemmy Baker Regional School District. So the ratio.
Well, there's three pieces.
Yeah.
You have the town residents of Plymouth, then you have the same group under the title Plymouth School District.
Correct.
And then they're also here as regional school district. So in terms of Plymouth residents, it's a triangle. But, you know, again, I'll harken back to Park and Rec, you know, when they say, all right, how much is the gross cost of the guys who work, not programming folks, but the guys who work in the fields and mow the library? 72% of that cost is borne by the schools, 28% by the town of Plymouth. And of that 72%, the high school pays 65% and elementary pays 35% of it. So that's why I didn't put anything in here, because you get into what piece of the equation and can it be misread.
Well, and I don't, and that's helpful to me, because we probably shouldn't put it in here, because then you have to change it every year based on what the hours are.
Exactly.
And if they get an extra call someday to Plymouth Elementary, then you got a day over there to, right? So that addresses the one concern I had, in terms of that.
53,000.
Yeah.
The second one, the second one though is, and I believe that Peter raised this at the last meeting, is the document doesn't say anything about your role, superintendent, having the right to jointly choose the officer. And I think that's a valid concern, because this basically says we're going to get an SRO, but it doesn't give us any input into who that SRO may be.
The chief has said publicly that we're going to, both principals will have a real input into who that person is. We've met twice already, and he's been a man of his word.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning
Yeah.
that, Mark, but again, I've got to step back here too, because to make clear, I don't represent the school district
Sure.
as an attorney,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when a document that it's called a memorandum of understanding comes in front of me,
Sure.
right, I start doing
Sure,
that.
I understand. And
And
I
but I
appreciate
don't represent the school district, I'm
Yeah.
sitting with my school board member's hat on, but that would be, the document is silent on that. So it says that the SRO is the control of the chief, which is correct, because that person works with the chief. But what happens if it's somebody, again, I'm not singling out any particular person,
Sure.
who just the administration doesn't get along with?
Yeah.
And the chief says to you, well, that's who you're getting. Well, there's nothing in the document that gives you the authority to say, no, we have to jointly choose this person.
Right, if that happened, yes, we would be in a tough position for that moment in time, that year. And then the superintendent would come before you and say, we're getting out of this agreement, we're not renewing this agreement. That will be some That'll be a real issue.
Okay, so if you feel most comfortable handling it that way, just leaving it silent, that would be, I'm okay with that. I raised it as an issue though, because it could,
Well, I'm going to give you what the association always tells me, and that is, you're not going to be here forever, and that chief is not going to be here forever. So,
Right.
And Bruce isn't going to be here forever. So,
Right.
if you want to put that in, that's fine with me. And I don't think Steve Lefebvre, I'm not speaking for Steve, but in our conversation, it's just what he said, that we would have input in who that officer was. I don't think any of us would be offended with a statement going into the memo of understanding from the high school.
Tim, how do you do the nurses? Because we contract with the nurses?
We sit with, yeah, you're right, Tim. We sit with the nurse, the local principal, and Kyla and I have sat and interviewed nurses. And then we work with Beth Simpson, who is the chief nursing officer, and we come to an agreement on that. There have been times when Beth has said, I think we have a terrific nurse for you for this building. The principal will have a chat. I don't even sit in. The principal has a chat, calls me and goes, yeah, it's going to work out fine. That's how we do it. But there's an understanding that if we're unhappy, they'll make a move.
So this will be similar?
Yes.
Sam?
sure, just generally when you draft agreements, you draft them not for the reasonable people like you all are, you draft them for the tyrants. Right?
Yes.
So that's just the way you look at it, but if,
No.
again, I don't want to hamstring the administration. If you're comfortable with this,
No, I will put that sentence in there, because I'm not offended by it. I don't think Steve Lefebvre is going to be offended by it.
I think that jointly, that the person chosen as the SRO has to be jointly approved by the superintendent and the chief.
Is that something that has to come for a vote to change the language of MOU? Is that just something?
No, because we haven't adopted anything.
So these are just drafts.
These are drafts. So what I would do is after this meeting, tomorrow or the day after, call Steve and say, we want to put in some language that says we need to be happy with the choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question looking down at these list of crimes, which of course I'm familiar with. There's nothing in reference to any computer crime.
I think that this is what the statutes were calling for in safe school zones. So I think it's outside of, yeah, it would be, go ahead.
We're on that, to that document now, because I had some comments about that too.
Well, you want to stay with the other document?
Previous one?
I just told you.
Are you done with the previous one?
What?
You have any more comments? No.
Let's do one at a time. So let's do the sort of the job description list here, and I will make a note to add and talk with the chief about adding that we have sign off on who the officer is.
No, right, I'm not gonna, no, I won't go through it and nitpick, because I have no issues with a lot of the things. I do have a little bit of an issue with the document that you were about to reference, though.
Okay.
That's the point.
Well, did Phil come up? Yeah.
Kevin?
What? I'm sorry, job description.
For
Yeah.
FCC.
Okay. Let's finish the job description and go on to the list of felonies.
Should this, the job description make mention somehow of supervisory evaluative responsibility? And what is the criteria?
See, I think the officer's an employee of the police department. They're a union employee of the police department. So I think that any evaluations are part of that collective bargaining agreement and way out of bounds for us to start poking at. We're either gonna say this is working or it's not working and not get into evaluating who the officer is.
No, I don't care who it is, I'm just talking about level of performance. I've been in situations where despite best of intentions,
Right.
fit is just not right.
Yeah, and I think that's when we would meet, as we do with nursing folks, and say, this is not working. You need to make a move. And they do. I mean, they want a happy customer. I mean, we're renting a service.
Right.
They're not our employees.
does this document need to say anything about if the performance is not acceptable? Parties will need to, I don't know, periodic.
It's an annual review.
Yeah.
It's an annual agreement. So I'm pretty comfortable with that.
I think the language, if we put the language that the person's to be jointly acceptable, we'll take care of that. Because then when they come up in the next year, say, it didn't work out this year.
We want to do that year that you're.
Yeah,
The year long.
I think that's the risk, that
Having had to change midstream, it's difficult if you don't have a process defined in place. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
But as long as everyone understands, I mean, it's not our employee. The evaluation process belongs with the police chief. We will have input, obviously, into performance, but it's not, we're going to measure you on this criteria. It's an overall.
Should it even say that the school district will be allowed to provide input into? Although we probably know it's going to happen anyway.
Yep. It's going to happen on a daily basis, I suspect. But I don't mind adding performance something. I mean, on the spot, I don't have the words, but that we'll discuss performance with the police chief. I would stay away from the word evaluate, because I think that would give him all kinds of union issues.
But I was wondering if we need to have an out when and if things just don't go right.
Sure. Yeah.
But this statement's saying he's going to do this list, so if he doesn't or she doesn't, then they're not in compliance. And you can say they're not in compliance.
Yeah, I mean, our relationship is we talk on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think we're going to.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce.
They meet directly with me.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. I just had a quick question on the grammatical item. Do we need to have a will on that? Will conduct, will do this? Isn't it below areas and just say conduct criminal, assist? Shall or will?
No, I took it all out, I will out, yeah.
That's what I would too.
Take all the wills out?
Yeah, why?
It's fine.
It just sounded strange and I'm not.
No problem.
Okay.
I would add one more thing if I could.
No.
No, because I didn't like the safe school zones one, and I know why this is in front of us.
Yeah.
Because the statute says, I went back and took a look at the statute.
Yeah.
And essentially, this has a lot of the language from the statute, and that's where the list of crimes comes from. I generally, and I've expressed this concern over the years many times, I generally don't like having policies that just parrot the statute, because it doesn't matter if we agree to do something, we have to agree to do it anyway because it's the statute. So who knows who's down in Concord, they could change the statute, then you've got to go back and change your policy, right? So I just would rather not do that.
The list is good for us when we hand it out to employees, because I will guarantee you the majority of our employees won't bother to look up the statute. But they'll look at this list and go, yeah, a lot, you may think it's a lot of common sense, as do most people, but people will look at it and go, okay, I need to do that.
I was thinking more in terms of the procedure, because what it talks about is each school district in the statute, in conjunction with local law enforcement authority, shall establish a memorandum of understanding for administrating these provisions. But it's changed now, so I assume the process in the past was if we had an incident that came in here, it got reported up to Bruce would make a call down to Plymouth Police Department, they'd send somebody out, right? Now, I assume the procedure is going to be, it gets reported to Bruce is going to call the SRO. So this is written generically, So why don't we just add instead of doing a whole thing like this, why don't we just add the list of duties at the end, serve as the quote, local law enforcement authority, quote, unquote, contact for the schools under RSA 193D. Because this is still written generically. It doesn't tell me who the local law enforcement authority is. It could be anyone down at the police station. But I assume part of the reason we want to have an SRO on campus is for, protection and those types of things, but also to make it easier for the administration, where you just have to walk down the hall to the office of the SRO or, call them on. And so that would make it explicit in the MFRO that the SRO is our contact person. So you don't have to call down to Steve, or you don't have to call down to somebody there, you just contact the SRO.
And make it one, you're saying? Make it one?
Well, it would just be.
It's a statement.
All
Just a
the,
statement, so eliminate.
again, the statute says, each school district, and this is 193-D:4C, right? It says, each school district in conjunction with the local law enforcement authority shall establish a memorandum of understanding for administering the provisions of 1A through C, right? And this certainly, the one that's put in front of us, certainly does it. It's a cut and paste of a lot of the language, except for one that isn't in there. One that isn't in there. That's the one that a written report may be waived by law enforcement officials only when they respond at the time of the incident by the police report. I couldn't find that in the statute.
Okay.
But I throw this out there for the committee, for the group. Wouldn't we satisfy that by just putting a line at the end of the other one saying, serve as the local law enforcement authority contact for the schools under RSA 193D. I mean, the statute says what it does. It tells us what the procedure is. Now, it doesn't address the part that you raised, Mark, where you want a document to stick in some of.
No, it doesn't mean we can't produce this and give it out, yeah.
I know, you can give the statute or photocopy the crimes of the statute. I generally don't like to just parrot what's in statutes.
I understand.
Do we have to act on this tonight? I mean,
No.
there's a lot of, Sam's brought a lot of stuff up, Tim has, Bill has. Can we make some of these changes and look at it again?
Yeah, you can look at it in July.
Okay, I think that'd be a good idea.
Sure.
Do you want me to work with Mark, to talk with Mark about some of these?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is that okay?
$100 an hour.
You want me to say my hourly rate on TV? I don't want to be locked into a certain rate.
Is there
No
any other
absolutes.
business to come before this committee at this time?
This is the right thing.
Any other business to come before the committee at this time?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Next meeting will be August 20th. This, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay,
Report, proposed appraisal of the...
Yes, attached to your agenda is a proposal from the SCC that was delivered to Bruce and then passed on to me and is part of your agenda package tonight. And I think these folks may be here to discuss their work and their proposal. So, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it over to you to run the meeting and ask folks if they want to talk about their proposal.
Barbara, can you give a little summary from your standpoint, because I'm just a member of the...
I just had a point of order. Can we speak as non-committee members, Mr. Chairman? Is that okay?
I'll just give you a brief overview. The committee came before school board last year, and this was one of the topics that the school board had approved for the SCC to research and look into. The committee diligently looked throughout the entire year, and I think what you have in your packet is a lot of documentation that they gave you regarding the pros of starting school at a later date. They also, here's the chairman, she'll do a better job than I will, I'm sure. They also included in that package some of the issues that would come before a later school time start. But I will tell you, the committee, they worked extremely diligently. It was extremely well attended, represented by students, faculty, almost all the community people. And at their last meeting, they did, Mr. Chairman, take a vote on bringing this forward to the full school board with their recommendation that we look at the possibility of starting high school at a later time. And I think in there, Patricia, help me if I'm, was it 8:30 on that they were looking? They didn't give you a specific time, but they didn't want to look before 8:30, like 8:15 or 8. They wanted to look at 8:30 on. And please, Patricia, fill in, because I know Barbara wasn't at that, she couldn't attend that last meeting. And it was, I think the vote was 11-1
Yes.
in favor of this proposal. I have a vote on that, and 5 faculty members, the students. Okay. Patricia, can I throw it out to you?
Fill in, but I wasn't here for what you said, so I'm not sure.
I just gave them the process that we went through all year and the research that we looked, the documents that they have in front. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but we're looking for direction from this board in regards how we move forward. But in regards to the proposal of starting school at a later start time, the FCC is recommending that we go forward with that proposal.
Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Is there any suggested end time? I mean, how does that affect the end time? When you start?
Well, I mean, I think that it would affect, if we start an hour later, we would end an hour later.
Okay.
Unless there's a change in the schedule, then, or if there's a change in the number of school days that we have, if say we had 185 school days, just saying, then you could make up the time that way. So, you know, the time is the time, so if we start later, we have to make that up somewhere.
And I think they included, Peter, all the impacts that you're talking about, athletics, co-curricular. We didn't come up with the exact thing, this is what you have to do. I mean, there's still further look, but, you know, the transportation, they looked at every single impact that could happen. But the documentation that they provided regarding what it does for a child's education obviously is extremely positive, starting school at a later time. In there are schools, we were provided schools, Keene is starting this next year. Interlake's already has this proposal that they're running on. Portsmouth, Oyster River, a couple of other schools that are using this later start time in their schedule.
Right, and the committee felt that through, even though we did do a lot of research, that there's just only so much a committee at that level can do. For example, the teacher contract, you know, that's up for negotiation in a couple of years. There's just nothing, there's nothing that we can do at that level about that issue. So that is out of our hands. And then there's also, you know, the transportation, there's several options to look at. And, you know, if we were asked to pick an option, we could pick an option, but of course that's not our call. Some of the options would have a monetary value attached to it. Some of the options would have community ramifications, like one of the options was to have the K through 12 students ride the bus at the same time, and of course that's what Interlex is doing, and the community would have, you know, feelings around that, I'm sure. So there's only so much that this committee at this level can do, and we feel as much as we could do right now. And if you feel like we would want to continue talking about this at our level next year, we would be open to that. However, really to communicate that, I'm not sure what we could do at this level.
And if I may too, Patricia, they surveyed the entire staff. They did not survey the entire student body or high school parents. But they did survey the entire staff on that.
Well, we surveyed the faculty, not the staff.
Correct,
So
not
just the
parents,
faculty.
correct.
Yeah,
And that's where the contract issue had come up from within there.
There are 61
61 full-time,
members
yep.
that we asked to take the survey, and 76% of those people responded. I think the numbers came down, 22 were opposed right out, 11 were open to the idea and would like to have some more information, and 12 were in favor.
Correct.
So, and again, that's just the faculty.
Any other questions or concerns?
I don't understand under transportation, the leapfrog. Can you explain
A
that?
leapfrog, that is where we would essentially leave the elementary school where it is, and I believe they start at 8:30 at Plymouth Elementary School, and they would stay exactly the way they are, nothing would be changed for them, but instead of the high school starting at 7:30, we would leapfrog right over them and start at 9:30. So the buses could be used again in the same way that they're used now, except instead of the high schoolers going first and then the bus is going to pick up the elementary school, the elementary school would stay where it is, they would get picked up first, and then the buses would go back out and pick up the high school students and have them back there by 9:30.
And what are we required by the state for number of hours per day?
Per day, there's no requirement per day, there's a limit on the amount per day. The requirement is per year, and it's 990 instructional hours over the course of the year.
And what does that come out to per day? I
That's-
know we're not.
I want to say it's
Are you
5
going to go to school 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day?
We're about 6.5 right now.
Right now, we do 6 hours of instructional time per day currently. And this,
30-minute
I
break.
believe, and again, without looking at, I believe the state requirement is you cannot go over 6 hours of instructional time in a day. If you look at the minimum standards for school approval, they set the maximum amount at 6 hours of instructional time per day at the high school level. That's the maximum. There is no minimum. I can look it up. I believe.
I knew you have to go to school X amount of time, and certain things, like passing times couldn't count, lunch
Correct.
couldn't count.
It's pure instructional time.
Right.
So we have the 4 blocks, 90-minute blocks per day, which work out to 6 hours of instructional time per day. It doesn't include lunchtime, it doesn't
Right.
include passing time. And that, at the state minimum standards in that document, that's the maximum amount of instructional time per day at the high school level. I believe the elementary school level is a different, it might be 5.
It is.
Oh, it is different, but I always thought if that was in the minimum standards document, that spoke to the minimum that had to be there.
It's, the wording is maximum. I can go look it up.
I
But it-
believe it, and that's a change, because that's what they would hold us, what you have, the superintendent used to have to sign off on, saying that, yes, indeed, we went to school for a minimum of however many hours it is per year. Or
It's the 990 per year,
Right.
which works out, if you, I want to say if you did 5.5 hours of instruction per day at 180 days per year, you would end up with your 990.
Okay.
And that's how it's explained in the minimum standards, because they switched from days to hours however many years ago, and that's what the language, how the language reads.
But we still go on days based on the collective bargaining.
Right. Right.
So when we go way over the amount of hours needed for instruction, because we're on days. So if we say, well, we're only going to go 178 days this year, we have it covered because we
Right.
met the hours.
Right, and that's how we set our graduation dates and so
Right.
on, based on,
Exactly.
again, and then,
But it's a lump sum of hours rather than per day.
yeah.
Dan?
It says here that the teacher contract doesn't specify a start. My recollection is it did, or
But not a specific time. It says the time the teacher has to be here before school and the amount of time at the end of the
30
day.
minutes after.
But it doesn't have a
15
specific time.
Okay. And another question I had was on so this proposal would be obviously not taking into account what any of the elementary schools are doing too, correct? They're
Yeah,
on-
this has nothing to do with the elevators. Right.
And then on the athletics piece, so we obviously can't change dates, times of sporting events. They're always going to be at the same time, so students are just going to get it.
We can work with our schedule.
Yeah, it depends. Working, principals can work together. Like there's certain schools I work with that we won't start games till 4:30, especially if they have lighting or whatever, because they don't like releasing their kids that early. It depends on the school, if Ms. Fallon was gonna get them.
I guess the point I was making was.
Not playoffs, though, no.
Was we, in Division II, we have some long travel times.
Yes.
To some games in some of the sports. And so the students are already getting back late at night anyway.
Right.
And then school the next day.
Yeah.
And I guess it can cut both ways. You can say, well, then they get to, have a couple of extra hours in the morning, but on the flip side, they're gonna be potentially losing more class time at the end of the day, right?
They could, yes. They could be getting released early. I mean, they're gonna be missing that last period class longer.
If you have to travel down to Milford, right, or, Hollis Brookline or something like that, to get down there for a 4:30 game, and you can have to leave pretty early.
If I may speak to that, I feel like that, I don't want to muddy the waters or anything, but this might be a really good time for us to think about several changes in the way that we've been doing things for a long time. I mean, this is a great district, and our kids are overall really happy here. However, times are changing, right? And I feel like, there's a way that we could do a schedule where there's a waterfall schedule. That would include, I know that's bigger than just start time, right? But as we think of these changes and moving our community forward, one thing we could consider is having a waterfall situation where the end of the day isn't always the same class that the students are missing, because we do have so many athletes in our building, and we live in a place where the lighting is, we lose sun earlier than maybe some other places, and the start times of the games are what they are. So maybe being creative around the schedule and having the rotating schedule that some schools have adopted, that might help as well. And I also want to say that as we move forward, I think that it's also important to consider in the conversation that we be mindful of educating ourselves and our students on wellness, right? And how to keep a schedule where either it starts at 7:30 like it does now, or if it starts at 8:30 or if it starts at 9:30, there will always be things that you can do to stack your health in your favor. And I think that those conversations also need to be happening amongst us, all of us, even the teachers and the adults.
Well, we have, scheduling would be ideal, Patricia. I mean, we've looked, but again, scheduling is going to be a contractual issue too. And this board has, we've looked at a number of schedules, but again, that's contractual. We have to work that.
Well, no, I realize
right.
that. I'm saying that I think
Same
that
thing
the
with the
change
hours.
might be bigger than
Right.
just the later start time. And looking at later start time really shouldn't be happening in a vacuum. There's other pieces to the
Correct.
puzzle to consider, and this might be a time for.
And student health is
reevaluating
number
what we're
one.
doing. And with student health at the center of the conversation, then that would affect a lot of the things that we're talking about here tonight.
Any other questions?
I have a logistical question, actually. So I'm not on the program and staffing committee, so this is not my decision, but it would be if it goes up to the full board later tonight. But my question is, exactly what is the proposal right now? What is the SEC looking for right now? So that the people on the program and staffing know what they're voting on to send up to the full board or not to send to the full board.
The SEC is asking that the school board consider starting school later. And we understand that we can't take the research of our particular community much further than we already have. It's, like I was saying before, it's not at our level. And if the school board is favorable to that idea of starting later, in the interest of our community's health and well-being, then what is the next step? I mean, it wouldn't be a step for the SEC to take. It would be at a level higher than that committee.
That seems like a contingent proposal. I mean, we would have to say in our proposal that, for me, I'm open to doing this, provided you get the contract agreed upon, you get the time schedule agreed upon, the elementary schools agreed upon, the busing agreed. There's a lot of things that are
It's
falling.
very complicated.
So we're not necessarily approving anything, we're just saying, if you can get all those answers answered, I wouldn't be opposed necessarily.
And I guess my question also, the follow-up was, and thank you, is who's going to do all that work? Because I negotiate teachers' contracts all the time.
Because she can only go, the SEC can only go so far.
Right, I understand the SEC's concern, but, you know, you have to consider reasonable probabilities too for certain things. So I don't think, and that's, I guess, it's not something you can answer. I know.
Sure, I know.
I mean, I think a lot of people might be open to the idea. The question is,
Part of the answer's right in there. 22 said no way, and you only have 12 saying yes. To me, that's a pretty strong indication of where the teachers stand, and they're the ones that are negotiating the contract. I'm not saying it's not a doable deal, but you're right, Sam, I've done a lot of contract negotiations. My question is, what do we have to give up to get this contract through? It's a give and take. And we haven't said anything yet to them or asked them, but that was kind of a little shocking to me. They didn't at least say, I'm interested in talking about it. I mean, I'm assuming 22 said absolutely no, is the way I'm reading this. Am I wrong?
They said they were not in favor of the earlier start time.
That's a pretty strong message.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
1/3, basically, right?
Yeah.
My math is correct.
But if I read the results, if I'm correct, 22 said no, 11 were open to it but would like more information, and 12 said yes, so that's 23 to 22.
Even so.
Very close, you know?
And then we didn't have 30.
All 11 on board, even be close.
You also
It has to be-
have to remember that the amount of information that the faculty had at the moment that they took the survey may not have been adequate. People need time to adjust to the idea, a changing idea that's going to change the schedule or change anything drastically. It's just a natural human response to kind of resist to change. And maybe in time, maybe in a year or two, when other schools are finding more and more success with later start time, maybe some of the faculty would be more open to it. I'm not saying they would or they wouldn't, but I think that the committee probably would say, speaking on behalf of the committee, is that we have to start somewhere. We have to start the conversation somewhere, and we'd like to get the conversation started.
So you know too, I provided a full faculty meeting, and the SEC faculty teachers did a wonderful job in the presentation. I led the entire meeting for the SEC proposal. So they got to answer, see all the information that we had, and ask all their questions. And then the following 2 days, I think they took their vote.
I guess, just like clarification, are you looking for a commitment from the board to endorse further work on this study? Or are you asking for the board to adopt a position that would say we would start the day later?
It would be great if you would just agree to do it. But I don't think that's realistic.
No,
I think at this point, we are asking you to endorse further investigation, and realistically, I think that's what we're asking. That's what this proposal is asking.
Okay.
yeah, but I guess the follow-up to that for me was, and that's what I understood what you said to consider is, who's going to do that?
Who's doing the heavy lifting?
Because I don't think anyone wants to spend hundreds of hours on something that some people might perceive has very little chance of being done. I certainly don't volunteer for stuff like that. That's just the reality. I understand the SEC can't do that work, members of the community, but it seems to me there's a lot of plates spinning on this, right?
There's a lot of moving
There's
parts.
a lot of moving parts in this, and if people can do, and if in the perfect world, if everyone were in favor of it, and people spent hundreds of hours piecing it together, and then it goes to a vote of the faculty and they vote it down, right?
You're not wrong.
Yeah, so,
But Ken, there's no time in there, right?
Well, that's a complicated question.
I'll take it back.
I'd like to see a survey done by the parents, because the parents are going to be affected by this as much as the staff and everybody else is, because, you know, the parents are all working different hours and different things, so if we had a survey from the parents getting their input from this, you know, so that could be a big impact also.
Okay.
And the schools that are changing over, are they, you know, taking data on test score? I mean, are they going to try to document the shift?
Yes, there is already some documentation out there. However, some of the research that I have read is supposedly supporting the idea, but sometimes I feel like it's shooting the idea in the foot. So some of the things that I read, they don't seem very scientific. You know, there's like a lot of anecdotal, you know, reporting, like, oh, the principal feels that after 3 years of later start time, the kids are more rested. I'm like, where's the research on that? But I think it's just so new that it's coming, right? It's coming. I think more sleep, obviously, the research is very solid on more sleep. The more sleep that people get, the better they function. And that's not just adolescents, that's everyone. But does starting later mean that students are getting more sleep and enough more sleep to make it worth it? And so what I've been reading is a little mixed, right? So one study that I read, and again, it wasn't very scientific, it was self-reporting, and it was of a middle school who did 3 years ago. They made the switch to start later, 1 hour later, and they were reporting, the students reported that they were getting between 8 minutes more and 30 minutes more sleep. And so that's discouraging to me. You know, what is that about? That's not, that research is not helping really the cause. But that's what's out there right now. And there's probably a lot of other places that are doing similar anecdotal kinds of reporting. I think it would probably benefit us all to maybe dig a little deeper and find some scientific research that's showing that the later start time, not just being more rested, because we all know that already, but the later start time is having a direct effect on student wellness and learning. That's what I'd like to see. I mean, it seems to make sense that that would be true, right? But that's what the faculty asked, actually. The faculty asked, where's the research coming from the schools that make the switch? And I think we'd all like to see that. And we should have our eyes out for it in the next few years, because it's coming.
Great work.
I'm just not sure where to go from here. You know, who's going to do further reviews or updates? Or
Well, I think for tonight, I think you accept the report. You've all been hit with something that is very complicated. I think you accept the report. At your retreat, you may want to talk about how to move forward with a process, not even dealing with the idea, but this is, most of the districts that have made the change are single districts where they control K through 12.
Yeah.
I mean, with the camera, I've got 40 school board members now out there. Mark Fischler is here from Thornton saying, what's the impact on the Thornton School District? Hey Diana, I didn't see you there. And Diana's from Thornton also. So all of the schools, districts are going to weigh in about how does it impact us. So you have a whole, and so Oyster River that has other towns, but they're controlled by a cooperative school board that controls everything K through 12. So you're proceeding into an area that's much more complicated than any of these folks ever attempted to go down.
I mean, sometimes we just can't even get on the same calendar.
We don't get on the same.
Right, we don't. That's
Yeah,
simple.
so it doesn't mean it can't happen. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that this is going to be a process that may be a little bit, it's going to be a huge education process. There'll be collective bargaining issues involved. This is not something that there's going to be approval next week and we're going to start in September. This is something that's going to take, quite frankly, a couple of years if you want to go down that road and take a look at it. So, but I would accept the report tonight. My advice: accept the report tonight, and then talk about this at your retreat in terms of a process, not public input about where we should do it or what would a roadmap be that takes into consideration all of the complications that we're going to face. And that may take you 3 or 4 meetings to think about what are the things we have to think about here.
Okay, have a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Okay, so I guess that's all we need. Next on the agenda is that's 18 scores.
Mr. Price?
So, this year, our juniors, earlier, we presented the PSAT 9 data and the PSAT 10 data. On that same day, our juniors took the statewide school day SAT, and that is the accountability test. And so what you can see, if you look across the top, in the place where the state has not come out with their rundown of it, but this is the data that's directly from the College Board. And so I took this information and put it into the way that the state's going to do that. And I have a couple things that I'll explain to you. The first thing to look at, though, is we had 155 students, juniors, take the test. Our mean score this year on the PBRW is the evidence-based reading and writing portion of the SAT. And the mean score for our students was a 532. To put that into comparison, last year our EBRW score was a 505. So we went up from a 505 to a 532. This year we had 107 students meeting the benchmark in EBRW, and last year that number was 93. We were at 69%, and you can see the comparison to the state below that. And then the line below that is every student in the United States that took the school day SAT on that date. It's not every SAT, it's not every version of the SAT, but it's on that date, students nationwide that took that, so you can see the comparisons, and you can see that we were...
Could you say those numbers, the folks in the camera? There's no chart, so...
Yes, okay, so we had 155 students in the state. There were 12,279 students taking it, and then the total number of students was 750,491. Plymouth Regional High School's mean score for EBRW was 532. The state was at 516, and everybody was at 490. Let me skip forward to the meeting the benchmark, and these are the percentages that the state uses. We were at 69% meeting the benchmark. The state average was at 64%, so we were 5 percentage points higher than the state average, which was a big jump from last year where we were below that. And then those increased numbers and the students with increase, that's just data that we use internally when we take a look at the students, compare their PSAT scores in 10th grade and see how many students jumped up in their PSAT scores to their SAT scores. That's where that comes from. On the math side of it, we were at 48% meeting the benchmark. The state was at 43%. And again, our mean score was a 527, with the state at a 509. The numbers that you see below that, I took a leap of faith, and again, this may not be 100% accurate, and the way the state looks at it, they like to see, one of the things that they look at when they look at your test scores is how do your students in general do compared to the students in special education, and they look for, is there a gap between the special education students and the regular education students? When I say that I took the leap of faith, and I put the number at 13, those were the number of students that were in special education as juniors at the beginning of the year that took the SAT. Now, the state has a formula that they sometimes may not have it at 13. They could only count 12 or they could count 14. So I based it on an October date. These were the students that were enrolled in special education, receiving special education services. So the state could tell us something differently when they come out with their results. But this was based on those 13% numbers. And so there you can see that their mean score for the EBRW was 430, whereas regular education students was a 541. And in math, it was a 423 compared to a 535. And then just down below the last two columns was a breakdown of students meeting both benchmarks, so they met it in both the evidence-based reading and writing as well as the math, and then the numbers below that, the students meeting no benchmarks, and again, we had 72 students out of the 155 meeting both, and we only had 45 not meeting either of those. If you go to page 2, these are the overall scores. So the SAT scores from a 400 to a 1600, and this gives you the entire breakdown of how these scores went based on the different categories, from a 400 to a 600 and right on up through. So does anybody have any questions about this data? Yes, sir.
Bob, not about the data, but with the recent decision by some higher ed institutions, choosing not to look at SAT scores, is there any inkling that the state may change its position as using this as the instrument? Or there's been no talk about that yet?
Hasn't even come up.
No, hasn't, really?
You know, I know so we're one of the states that uses the SAT. There are many other states that use the ACT. And again, there are colleges that make, any type of entrance exam optional. But we're one of I think it's a smaller number. I think there are more states that use the ACT nationwide. In New England, the SAT seems to be king. But I had not, they haven't called me up to ask my opinion. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business?
In non-public, we have some resignations and some nominations for summer staff and also a support staff nomination. That will be in non-public after the full board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our next meeting will be in
August 20th.
If there's no other questions, the meeting will adjourn.
I'm going to switch the agenda around a little, and we'll do agenda review and disposition and privilege of the floor, and then jump right into the committee reports and get those done. So, agenda review and disposition.
Madam Chair, we will need the non-public session just very briefly for personnel.
Okay. Privilege of the floor.
access as community members to the report that was assembled on late start time?
Yes?
Do you have access to that?
Yeah, we'll put it on the website. How's that?
It should be in the, on our website too. If you look under the library, yeah.
It might already be on
It's
the website.
there.
Do you-
It's all there.
That's where it would go.
I'm not sure there is a
So,
link to the SBC website from the main school board or the.
It's on the it's on the school's library. When you click on.
Library, correct.
Click on the school website under library, it's all there.
can we put a header on the website tomorrow? That's-
I'll tell
That links
Amelia.
people right to the report? That way it'll be a little easier for you.
Yep,
Yes, these.
absolutely.
You can
No,
pass
that's
those out.
Where should I just stand up?
Sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Daigle. I'm a former resident, a parent of 2 girls that go to TCS that will someday get to come here. As Mark mentioned, I am newly elected on the Vermont School Board. I'm not here representing the school board or as any concerns for the school board for TCS. I'm here as a resident and a parent, somebody who feels really passionate about this issue. So I submitted a letter to the editor, which a few people may have seen. It's all right. Read it to you. It says, as adults, we all know what it's like to have to go to work after not getting a good night's sleep. It's rough, we're drowsy and focused, and certainly don't get our best work done on those days. It seems to me then crazy that we are sending our teens off to school at PBRSB like this every single day. Over the past few decades, there has been a tremendous amount of research done on the importance of sleep, not only on sleep in general, but also on teenagers' unique biological sleep patterns as well. Science has shown that their circadian rhythms and their melatonin production change specifically during the teen years. And these biological changes really dictate their bedtimes, irregardless of social and school needs. With all this knowledge, virtually every highly regarded medical organization and sleep foundation has come to the same very explicit conclusion that we need to let our teens sleep in the morning. As you all know, PRHS starts at 7:30, but due to our widespread layout, we have to start busing so early in the morning. It's still pitch black out in the middle of winter when our teens are standing out there at their bus stops. But science says this is hurting our children. They are sleep deprived because of it. In fact, if you start to dig into this research, which I really encourage you guys to do, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Center for Disease Control, the American Psychological Association, the American Sleep Foundation, every single one of them says, without a doubt, that school should start at 8:30, at least for teenagers. Not a single organization that you can find recommends starting before that. Not a single body of science. So yes, there's been a multitude of studies, some more anecdotal, some more scientific, but some of, just as an overview for you guys as you move into this, and I appreciate your work in looking into this. An overall increase in sleep time with no change to the time they go to bed, decreased tardiness, decreased absenteeism, decreased drowsiness during the school day, decreased anxiety for our teens, decreased depression for our teens, decreased suicidal thoughts for our teens, an increase in test scores, an increase in school performance and grades, decreased risk of obesity, decreased use of caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol for our teenagers, a decrease in teen car accidents because they're not driving drowsy, a decrease in sports injuries and head injuries, including concussions, an increase in sports performance, and all with no change to their participation in sports, music, and extracurriculars. Several hundreds of districts across the country have already made the change, jumping on board with what all the medical associations agree with, including the Seacoast, Interlakes, Keene, which is also a widespread district, such as our own. As far as studies, I have one off the top of my head. Hold on, I'm going to get it for you right here. McKeever and Clark in 2017 did a study. This is just one little blip of information, but they took data from 29 high schools in 7 different states that shifted their start time to 8:30 or later, and they looked at it 2 years later, and they looked at graduation rates. And the graduation rates went up 9 percentage points. Not 1, not 2, 9 points. And for the life of me, I can't think of a principal or a superintendent or a school board member or a parent for that matter who wouldn't want their graduation rate to go up 9 percentage points. I'm not saying it's easy. There are a lot of logistics to look into and to think about, and this SCC has done a tremendous job of already starting that for you guys, but I really think this is the momentum that we're going. I have a lot of parents here who feel the same, and I just wanted you guys to show, to see that there is support for this. There is a lot of support out there for parents that think that this is, that kids have to get to early, and that doesn't even mesh with parents' schedules. Kids leaving so early and getting home so early. So I appreciate you guys keeping this in mind, that there is some parental support as you look further into this. I know it's a big topic and a lot of logistics to figure out, but change is always a little difficult in the beginning, and other school districts have already done it and been making this change. So I think there's a lot to think about there, but there's so many benefits once you start digging in. And it's tempting to listen to anecdotal, to one person's testimony about why we should get up even earlier and force the kids to go even earlier, because that's what real life is like. But there's a UNH researcher, Erin Sharp, who does this, and she says, as tempting as it is to listen to those individual testimonies and those individual concerns, science says this is what's right for our kids. Every medical association says this is what's right for our kids. We have to shift it with their biological clock. So thank you, that's just my little 2 cents. I appreciate all of our work that the committee and the school board plays in. But we're behind it as some parents, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would ask if you have something new or different than what's in the report, please feel free to talk.
I think I do, although I have not read the whole report. I'm Robin DeRosa. My daughter is Ruby Lonergan, who is a sophomore at PBRSB, and 2 years ago, her freshman student council platform was to change the school start times. And as a job, I am a researcher, and she came to me and said, I want to do this, and I was like, great, it's better than better school lunches. So I sat down with her to help her research. And I personally wasn't super in favor of it in terms of my own schedule. I'm a 5 a.m. riser. But I will tell you, when I looked at the research, my mind was blown. I will beg to differ a little bit with my dear friend Patricia Rella, who has changed my daughter's life more than anyone in this room ever will, including myself. But the research is really overwhelming. It's not even like climate change, where you can Google climate change and find climate change deniers. You can't find school start deniers once you dig into the research, because it is so ubiquitously in favor of this change, particularly for academic performance, sport performance, health and wellness, and psychiatric well-being. So for me, as a parent, when I started at my daughter's coaxing to do that work, I really transformed. And the last piece I just want to say is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The research has been done, it's been consolidated, perhaps to a certain degree in this report that I tried to contribute to a little bit, but probably even in more consolidated ways at organizations that do this work for a living, so we can easily get the whole aggregate research. We can also look, for example, there are principals in New Hampshire and athletic directors at high schools in New Hampshire who have written up their accounts of how they made the changes with sports and stuff, so we don't have to reinvent the wheels. So we will have to negotiate the contracts, we will have to talk to our busing companies, but we won't have to solve the logistical problems as if they've never been solved before. So I encourage us, once we dig into it, almost any concern that you have about doing this has both a logistical and a sort of medical psychiatric reason that it can and will be solved. So I encourage you to take it seriously and not think that this is something that we can't do. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right. We have the minutes of May 21st, both public and non-public, and non-public minutes of May 7th. They were all presented to you. If there are no corrections or amendments, they stand approved as written. Now we'll go into committee reports, sorry. So start off with facilities.
Facility opened our meeting a little after 5. I'm not sure how much after 5, but it was shortly after 5. We discussed the, you said facility?
The open house was the first.
No, that's not me.
Lisa, did you do?
Yeah, I know, I was splitting you, but, okay. I was confused too. All right, so the minutes were approved as written, no changes. Sunday, October 6th, we're gonna have an open house to our new beautiful facility here. Times and details will be available down the road. We went over a short little list of summer improvements. Our next meeting is August 20th.
Thank you. Policy and budget.
Yes, we met after the facilities, and we approved the minutes, and there were copious handbook changes that we made. Some were just housekeeping, we'd already approved the changes before. Some of the other ones I will briefly touch on. That was the testing program we had changed, bringing them up to date with the new state standards, I believe, Bob. Okay. We also touched briefly on a dress code. I don't think we already appreciate the differences to the dress code. That was housekeeping that we had taken care of as well. We also had done the acceleration problem policy we had approved earlier. And we touched briefly on the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and the military recruitment information. I believe that was, Mr. Howland had referred to changes in the state and federal level, and we just looked at that. Also, the parents' guardians' right to know, and the students' right to privacy act. Again, that was the same kind of a situation that was changed down in Washington. The French Honor Society and the Spanish Honor Society we addressed and approved in the winter. Will these things be listed on the high school website, all these changes?
Yeah, the entire handbook is
Okay.
on the site.
Okay. We also discussed the discipline for computer misuse, the new computers that the kids receive. And instead of taking away the computers, there is a policy in there that involves detention and Friday after school suspension, et cetera, for various infractions. We had a memorandum of understanding
And
between
we need to vote on that, don't we? The handbook
Yes.
the handbook changes?
Yes.
Okay.
So coming from the committee is the recommendation
Yeah.
to
Okay.
change the
Right.
handbook, make the handbook changes as
Okay,
listed.
Coming from committee?
Yeah, it was
All in
com-
favor, please.
So all those in favor of doing that?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstaining?
We had a memorandum of understanding with the police department, which we discussed on infinitum, and we have pushed that out into our July meeting because there were so many little nuances that were to be changed that we figured that we didn't want to do it without a chance to look at a more finished product. We also discussed the Pemmy Baker Regional School District expenditures and general fund, and we coming from committee was a motion for retaining a certain sum of money.
The authority to retain up to $264,000.
Okay, coming from committee, there was a motion made for the school board to retain up to $260,000 And what's the
64.
unreserved fund balance?
264, yeah.
64,
And then guarantee an unreserved fund balance of 100,000.
to be returned to the district.
Yes,
To be, right.
yeah. So what we're gonna, before you vote, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So we're gonna close the books. You've given us the authority to retain up to 264 prior to the end of the fiscal year. So we told taxpayers we definitely give back 100,000. So I come to you to close the books. I'm gonna come with a raw number and say, here's what's left. And then you will decide if you want to fully do the 264 and then give the rest back. Or if it's, say, 300,000, you may say 200,000 on reserve, 100,000 in retainage, whatever you choose to do when you close the books. But we just want to get the retainage authority on record prior to the close of the fiscal year.
Okay, coming from all those in favor of us retaining up to $264,000, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Vote in the affirmative. So, you should have said that actually, this for the committee. Okay. And then the next meeting is August 20th, and then we adjourn that.
Program staff.
I'm not ready yet, but I'll.
I wasn't
Minutes were approved for the May 21st. Second, we had a proposal from the SEC to start school earlier or later. And we're taking that in the right number. We'll be discussing that at our retreat and see where we go from there. And then the next item was the SAT scores, and Mr. Price gave us an overview of those. And we accepted his review. After that, we had nothing more other than our next meeting is August 20th at 5 o'clock.
Thank you. And I was not sure what the people were staying for, so that's why I moved the committee reports up, but I guess we didn't need to.
And that's why I jumped the gun, because I thought we wanted to get that one so they could get.
Yeah, I just wanted to see where you were going with that.
Well, that was my fault. Superintendent's report.
Yes, I just want to bring the board up to date a little bit. Budget negotiations at the state level are going on. There's a Senate budget, a House budget, and a governor's budget. And those three parties are talking. All indications are that there will be more money for education than were in the initial budget proposals of the governor. The governor said he's open to sending more money back to cities and towns in education. Also, sending more money back to town halls for municipal use. So, which are both very good things, because both of them have a direct impact on the tax rate. So we don't know what the final numbers. The House budget's a little more generous than the Senate budget, than the governor's budget, but the parties are talking, and there appears to be more money for education, a general agreement. Now, what those numbers end up at, we won't know until it's all done. But it's better than the preliminary numbers that we had at budget setting time, which will be a help. And as I've said before, we don't need to do any more spending. We have the budget that we asked for. Folks were very, very generous. All of that money that comes to us will go back to reduce local tax rates or the assessment in the matter of the Fenby Baker district. So, and then the board retreat Tuesday, July 23rd at Owl's Nest at 2 p.m. Again, we won't be talking about the SCC proposal that day, about the merits of the proposal. If we do talk about anything at all from the committee level, it would be a roadmap to how to go about the process of bringing this proposal out into the public, because it has ramifications in all 7 sending towns and all 9 communities in SAU 48. So. And that's my report, Madam Chair.
Mr. Parsons?
Short and sweet. Last day for the kids was today in the regular classes. They start their finals tomorrow. And that'll take them till Monday. Makeup is on Tuesday. Teacher's last day is on the Thursday of next week, so long haul. But the kids will start their finals and they get released. I think the bus picks them up at 12:50, 12:55. They take 2 finals each day. And we're obviously getting to do some of the work that Mr. Halloran talked about, so we need to get ready for that to happen. So it's going to be a quick turnaround for us. We had a very successful graduation. If you didn't see it or hear about it, it was very successful. College did a great job. The facilities down there, and the class of 2019 was most accommodating. Good time had by all. That's my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Discussion items.
Yes, Madam Chair. We'll have nominations after non-public. In your packet is a preliminary list of meetings for the fall. And let me just...
For that, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, again, we'll have your retreat on July 23rd, and then we'll have committees and full boards on August 20th. So you'll meet twice over the course of the summer. And then you don't need me to read the rest of the list. But I would highlight that on Tuesday, November 19th, we'll be presenting the FY21 budget to Policy and Budget Committee. And also, if you note down below, the winter SAU budget hearing and winter meeting will be Thursday, December 12th, right here at the high school. So the fall is in front of you on that. So.
Thank you.
Welcome. Food pricing. There, again, in your packet, there is a memo to the 3 superintendents from Dan Rossner. Dan works with the Department of Ed at the state level, who passes on to us from the federal level. And I don't need to read you Dan's memo, but basically, when you go through all the equations, the long and the short of it is we need to increase our money for school lunch to from $260 up to $270. The federal standard now is at $286, but if we only increase it a dime, we meet the federal standard. So rather than jumping right to 286, I would rather go from 260 to 270, and that's for the government supported lunch, not pizza or a salad bar or any of the others.
You need a motion?
Yes, please.
Is there a second to that? Second by Peter. So all those in favor of increasing the school lunch by 10 cents?
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
Thank you. And I'm all set, Madam Chair, other than non-public.
Any board member concerns?
It's not a concern, but I'd like to make a comment. SEC report, it wasn't really a report, it was a presentation of their motion. As representative to the SEC, I just want to say that for the last 10 years I've worked with this committee and have been very impressed with the students and the way they relate to the adults on the committee, teachers, faculty, staff, and the surrounding town representatives, and myself as a school board member. And I think, Lisa, you have served on that committee as an alternate or a regular during this time too. You've probably seen what I've seen and experienced as well. The students this year worked extremely hard on this issue of delayed time opening. And I know at the beginning of the year, this current year, when we brought the issue to the board to discuss or to ask permission to explore what we could, there was a lot of hesitation on the board's part. And one of the board members did say, let's give them a chance. And I'm so grateful that you did that. There is a lot of work that has been done. And as Patricia Rella said, there's only so much the board, the committee, SCC, can do. So I'm grateful that you're considering to discuss further, and I'm grateful that you gave me the chance to do this. I'm really happy to be there on this committee.
Thank you. Any other concerns? Do I hear a motion to go into non-public for personnel? Barbara, seconded by Phil, so